You know, it's a one time.
Thank you. Well, welcome back. So while you please feel free to have more pizza outside or any other drinks. I think we are ready to start. So congratulations to those of you who actually managed to click on time. We didn't quite expect that kind of passion for this sort of topic. Experience teaches that passion disappears through the weeks. So I expect to see less and less people, and that will not be taken as an offense. But should you keep working with us, this is the second lecture. If you missed the first one, that's too bad, really, because I will just repeat a few little things to begin with, just to warm you up. It was quite a crucial lecture, so a lot of the framework will be missing. It's like joining a Netflix series on the second season. Some things are really serious. As a second lecture, this is also part of the framework that I thought might be worth providing in order to understand how we're going to do digital ethics, ethical AI, etc. So as often, especially for the non-philosophers among us, philosophy is well known for never getting to the point. You take a step back, and then a step back, and then a step back, and a step back. At some point, you forget what was the actual thing you wanted to discuss because we've been moving backwards in terms of conditions or possibility of conditions. It won't happen. The next lectures will be about the ethics of AI, but we need to take another step back. We're still sort of looking at the big territory, mapping it. This will be what in philosophy will be called a lecture on, some people would call it metaphysics, some other people would call it ontology. It's basically about the ultimate nature of reality. Not as physics would understand it, but even more abstract, even more generic. Part of the attempt that I will make in the presentation is to unhinge a few conceptions or preconceptions or prejudice in terms of how we see the world, how we perceive it, and try to install some new perspectives. You don't have to agree with me, but it will be the perspective from which we will be doing the rest of the work. So in the same way as I spoke about the levels of abstraction last time, this time the sort of approach that I would like to share with you is summarized by the title: how we move from looking at the world in terms of things, property of things, and processes that involve things with properties, changing those properties. As you go stuff, properties of stuff, and as stuff changes properties, there is a process. Yeah, from that perspective to a perspective which looks at the same world and the same kind of furniture, as we would say, but from the angle provided or the level of abstraction of relations. I need to anticipate a few points so that there will be no surprise during the next hour or so. One, and I know we are recording, I hope the recording is working. I hope so, especially for the people who are not here. Some of the terminology I'm going to use is semi-standard, as usual. People do not agree on plugs and sockets, let alone on concepts in philosophy. There are more than 25 or 30 kinds of sockets and plugs around the world. You can imagine how many concepts there are in terms of describing the ultimate nature of reality. So the point is not to have only one, it's to understand which one you're using. If you're here, it has that particular format. This will come back at some point as a picture. So the point is not to say, well, this is the only way of seeing things, but understand, well, since we're here, that's what we're going to know. as I told you last time, level of abstraction or the interface that you're going to use in order to understand something is the proper way of speaking. We should not look at the world in terms of lens. Today, it should be even clear why that matters. Again, I'm anticipating what you're going to hear in more detail in a moment. A lens does not provide any way of formulating change properly. So imagine a society that changes from being, say, based on land and aristocracy to pre-industrial and then industrial. Then society has 3 stages, 1, 2, 3. How do you look at that? How do you formalize that change? The level of abstraction provides you the means to formulate that clearly. Now, in terms of a particular type, society changing some variables. Lens is good for anybody. So we'll also do a little bit of that as a recap after the review. The other point, again, I'm anticipating, but more in the slides in a moment, is how do you choose your perspective? Remember, lens is good today, good tomorrow, my way, your way, anyone's game. If you start adopting a level of abstraction, immediately push for a justification. Why that, as opposed to another one? The justification happens at the stage when you have to provide the reasons why you have adopted that level of abstraction as opposed to another. If you will do any design at any stage in the world, in your life, whether you know it or not, they will ask you to justify your level of abstraction. Why are we designing this particular bill or policy in this way? Well, because the purpose is, and that's the purpose that determines the level of abstraction, why are we producing this particular watch in such a way? Why this interface? Why do we have to put, why do we have to restructure, for example, a piece of university into a school? Well, because tells you how someone is looking at that particular sort of element, and therefore, whether, for example, people are at the same level of structure, say at the administration, are we all talking about the new school of X, approaching the design of that school from the same aspect, or are you looking, for example, at the financial aspect? Someone is looking at the student, so the type variables are not the same. At that point, you know how to be conversating, you're bypassing each other, and that's can really be the problem. So all this is going to happen in the next few slides. This is the summary, as usual. So I will tell you a little bit about the level of abstraction dynamics. I just did that, but a quick revision. And then how we distinguish between systems, models, and blueprints. This is also crucial. It is let that person in, the person who doesn't know how to do it. Yeah, thank you. The door, when you turn it, opens. Yeah. Yeah. Then, what a relational ontology looks like. I'm going to introduce some terminology there. Again, you don't have to buy the terminology as long as the distinction is clear. Call it one way of thinking number one way of thinking number 2. Your terminology. I'm going to use metaphysics for anyone who talks about the world in itself, independently of how we approach it, perceive it, quantify, qualify, our body, our vision, our maths, our chemistry, just the world in itself. Now, there are people who hear the metaphor is important. They hardly have a see, that is Plato, but they hear the voice of being. Lucky them, okay? Plenty of envy. Heidegger could hear being speaking to him, and that's why he sounds like he's a bit of a priest of being. Well, in this classroom, we do not assume that being is talking to us. Sometimes when you start thinking that the reality itself is talking to you, the line between that and madness is thin, really thin. Okay? We will assume that instead we approach whatever is out there in terms of whatever we have, means of. So we will do something that Heidegger was very much against. We will be very Cartesian and Kantian, Descartes and Kant. We will think in terms of what means do I have in order to describe, for example, in biology, what life is. I can't simply describe life full stop. I need to describe life for a purpose, whatever abstraction it is. Now, doing that means having a ontology. So imagine that, clear, that is your interface. I hope that the people online can probably see this. So we are here. The source of data is here. Call it reality itself. If you are Kantian and you ever heard about Kant, there is the nomenon, the world in itself. The world in itself sends data, messages to the knowing subject here. The knowing subject here has a particular framework. It doesn't mean that we don't have access to, but we have a privileged access, a kind of access. Somehow, we need to transform the data coming from the source, the world, into information on this side. We do that at a level of abstraction. This level of abstraction, called an interface, could be a variety of things. Luckily, remember from last time, we're not stuck with our 5 senses. We're smarter than that. We've got plenty of science that provides different ways of formulating whatever the data coming in are telling us about the source. But in the same way as a radio sending a signal is, so we get it as people who are listening to the radio, but the signal is not about the radio. 1, it does not mean that there is no radio. 2, it doesn't mean that the signal is about the radio. It's Mozart, for goodness sake. So it doesn't tell you what the radio is like. Also, there is no radio signal. Of course there is. Of course there is a source. Just that the source is sending the signal and we interpret the signal. So anyone who doesn't quite like this, you should read more Heidegger, because that is the kind of philosophy that you like. If you think that this is reasonable, well, you are much more on the line of Descartes and Kant, meaning we don't have access to the world without having some means to manage their access. Oh, by the way, for those of you who think that there is really an open debate about this, which there is, of course, not, those are insane, you're right, but just in case, imagine someone telling you that you have access to reality without ever relying on your language, your education, your culture, the time when you were born, and who told you what, when, the kind of sources you rely on, the kind of sources that you find reliable, actually. And you know that there is a recipe for disaster. Also, find out all, and then it doesn't work. Anyone who hears the voice of being, there's only one voice. And if you disagree, you're wrong, and there's zero tolerance. Now, zero tolerance can be epistemological or can be also moral, meaning you don't think like me, you are wrong, let me tell you how it is. If you keep going that way, at some point there are crusades and concentration camps, meaning you need to think like we do. It could be, China at a particular century, it could be Nazi or Italy, fascist, it doesn't matter. But you didn't get the message, and it's the only message. It's the message. I get it, you don't get it, you're wrong, let me teach. Not the road that you want to take on an everyday, tolerant, epistemologically open discussion. So, ontology is what happens here. Metaphysics is what happens here. If you describe the world in itself, you're doing metaphysics. And I use this, again, for the philosophers, as Hannah would have used metaphysics, like a joke, okay? Not what you want to engage with. But here, the ontology of the world as we construct it, linguistically, epistemically, conceptualism. And if you really want to go down the road of more scholarship here, there's a famous philosopher, Cassirer, actually ended up here at Yale. We have the archive. The philosophy of symbolic forms is 4 volumes, not recommendable during the evening, is a masterpiece. So, what kind of ontology we want to have here? One made of things and qualities and processes, or one that is relation. So, we're going to propose a relational ontology. And final point, distinguishing between epistemology that describes the world as if we were taking photographs, And epistemology, or the theory of knowledge, has been with us for a long time, since at least Socrates onwards, if not before. And there has been an attempt, sustained attempt, of thinking that somehow our knowledge represents the world, reality, whatever is this subject. Actually, if you think carefully about it, it really doesn't. It builds with the data provided by the world a reasonable, reliable, etc. picture. But it's not a representation. It's not like as if you had within your ontology an individual and the painting of the individual. No, whatever is out here, we're not taking a picture of it, because whatever picture you're taking is already an interpretation of it. At the same time, remember, we don't want to go all the way to, oh, it's just an interpretation, no, they are not. It's all facts are social constructs. Objects don't exist. That is the insane way. So a German way of doing badly all this would be talk to reality itself. The French way of doing badly the same thing, it's all relatively, it doesn't matter. Can we just stay right in the middle? Meaning there's something out there, it sends the data, we are building with the data, it's total realism, don't jump out of the third floor, it will be very painful. Reality is what it is, you're bumped against the table, and there is nothing you can do about it. At the same time, speaking of the table out there, don't, because there's no such thing as the table out there, independently of the fact that I even use English to describe tables. So this will be a move from two Greek words, mimesis as representation and poiesis as construction. We do a lot of poietic work. And actually, if you look at science, science is really turn a page when it started being poietic, meaning that you build the experiment. The experiment you build is total fake, so to speak. Circumstances in which you would never find yourself. Imagine the mental experiment, high school levels. Imagine a body going through a plane with no friction. Then, what do you mean no friction? I mean, have you ever met a body that doesn't have a friction in this world? Well, it's a thought experiment. Imagine what would happen. I said, well, yes, of course. Or CERN, you have to build a whole story and a whole very expensive apparatus in order to test a particular sort of scientific theory. So there's a lot of building that makes an experiment. So in fact, in experimental science, we talk about designing an experiment. Designing, not inventing, and not discovering either. So not today, but in the following lectures, design will be our friend. You don't invent like you invent a Harry Potter through your sheer imagination. But you don't discover, as people think you can discover, the ultimate essence of the universe because it's talking to you. Unless, as I said, you hear the voice of me. If you hear their voice, we can talk about it. Okay, so next, let's do some work. So you've seen this interface, and this is the extent level of abstraction of which we are embodied. Luckily, we are the only animals, in fact, the only entity we know of as of today, not barring any other existent form of life elsewhere, that can free itself of its own epistemic abstraction. We can transcend, surpass, modify, and have a microscope, a telescope. We can hear things, and we can see things that our bodies were not meant to, which is great. That's why we are not better than, in this particular field, better than other animals. In this context, I told you this is how we look at a particular theory. Maybe we just need to leave that door open. Try it again. Yeah. Let's leave that open. Can you block the door, Nicholas, please? So people just disturb outside. So this is what a theory looks like. And remember, in these lectures, and it's just a convention to be on the same page. There's nothing religious about it. We're going to talk of systems as whatever is out there. And of course, every now and then I will talk about it as if we have to access it. So if I want to describe, say, a mobile phone, that is the system. I do that for a particular reason. Maybe I want to describe it for a user. So I have a user interface level abstraction, which generates a particular model of that thing and identifies some features called abstraction. This is not accidental, by the way. There's something called informational structural realism, or also known as, highly not recommended. But if you really want to go down that road, there is a way of doing philosophy of science in the hard way of developing an informational structural realism about all this. So, okay, so this is what we did last time. So a level abstraction, is just a summary, is a finite but not empty. You have to have some set of observables. Remember, this is a confusing terminology. Thank you, computer scientists. Where is that? There you go. For making that life a little bit difficult. Observable. Oh, so I'm observing it now. Observable, as in democracy in a country is observable. Yeah, okay. Something that you take into account, moderated by transition rules. That is crucial. Transition rules tell you, for example, that if this is a thermostat, and it has a particular temperature now, and it moves to a different kind of temperature, the transition rule is what determines that thermostat at state 1 goes through stages until it gets to state n. The type remains the same, a particular, say, centigrades or Fahrenheit. The figures change to transition to show that there has been a change. Transition rules, for those of you who find this counterintuitive, are also what enable you to play chess. Checkboard, checkboard, checkboard. The transition rules of the game enable you to move from state 1 to state 2 to state 3. Now that is very discrete. Normally transition rules are also in everyday life continuous. We like to segment, like in a chess, not one move, the other move. But of course the temperature doesn't go through, it's a continuum through real numbers for another day. No? The observer is a type variable with a label that represents the name assigned by the epistemic agent as, say, temperature, to a feature of the system under consideration. You get that. A type variable is a placeholder for an unknown changeable reference, whatever is out there. No. And a set called is a type that consists of the possible values that the variable can take. So, for example, say your age is the type, and the set can range normally between 0 and 100. Or maybe 200, whatever it is. Months can take only 1 to 12, thank goodness, because the number of mistakes I would have made in this country. A transition rule is a predicate that provides the trajectory of change of the observables inside its type. Imagine an arrow. So channel age, moving through the arrow, age, years, moving through the transition. All very simple. It just gets a little bit complicated once you quantify this. That is an interface. An interface is a specific kind of an epistemic level abstraction. It's a set of observables, whatever you want to put there. The observables have behaviors. Behavior is the counterpart of the transition rule. How does it change? How does it behave? For example, this icon can be clicked. Well, that is the behavior of the icon. So it can change state from being not clicked to having been clicked and open. On and off, that's just what it is. Or it can move. Also, it has more of a behavior. That's a different kind. You get the gist. They are placed between data and information for the epistemic agent. So whatever is on the other side, level abstraction, whatever is here. Call here, the system provides the data, the model is made of information. The other thing that the lens do not provide, apart from all this, is that level abstractions can be combined. Have you ever heard anyone who has multiple lenses that start overlapping? Some you can't see anything. So one extra lens of it, because really it's a matter. But level abstraction is exactly what you get if you say, look, I want to have a more complex level abstraction of this building. One part of which is determined by the level of abstraction of an architect. The other one of a university administrator in terms of safety and how many people can be hosted and what kind of lectures and what kind of offices and so on. The other one is an architecture. The other one could be a plumber. The other one is the electrician. You can build this into more complex level abstractions and have all the right variables that you start lining up. Once you have all this in place, I hope you will remember the previous picture with the system out there and the model of the system. whatever research you've done, probably writing a paper or your final year dissertation, a chapter for the thesis, an article to be submitted, you have been either Kantian or Hegelian. Whether you know it or not, it doesn't matter. That is what modernity has given us as two ways of handling the logic that I just gave. How information gets shaped, formulated, put together at a level of abstraction when it comes to a system. What these two people did was to look at 2 out of 3, and today we'll introduce the third, otherwise no. How can you not argue that poor Kant and Hegel didn't quite get it? We call them the conceptual logical information. This is Kant. I skipped the details because the details are not so crucial, but the philosophers will enjoy it. You can call that transcendental logic if you want to be fancy, but it doesn't matter. So Kant. So you have a particular thing out there in the universe that you don't know. You have no pure, unmediated access to. You have a purpose, you have a functional model, and the model identifies what kind of work, well, the conditions of possibility. What you're asking, and this is normally what happens in STEM and sort of similar disciplines, you really look normally at the causal reasons. Why it's happening? How did it happen? What brought this to that particular stage? What made the brain do this? Or why the apple falling off the tree, etc. So there's a lot of why and causality, and therefore conditions of possibility. You have a phenomenon, and you try to look at what brought that phenomenon about. Of course, this is way more specific in Kant, who was looking for some specific kinds of conditions of possibility around knowledge, etc. But this is not a lecture on that Kant. But get this in terms of, if you've ever done some work in terms of why this is happening, what brought this about, what causal links are behind the effect I'm looking, well, then you've been somewhat Kantian. Is there another way of doing this? Of course, that's why I introduced the other guy. Now, if Kant goes hand in hand, and if you read the German philosophy from that moment onwards, it goes really, like pepperoni on the pizza. Perfect combination with a Coke, like Kant imagining in life. Now, Kant and the hard sciences, chemistry, biology, physics, in fact, cosmology in his case, geography, those kind of sciences that look at the causal explanation. What brought about what. If you look at Hegel, and you want to be fancy, you would call that dialectical or dialectic logic. Well, it's not looking so much at the conditions of possibility, but at the condition of stability. How does it happen that, say, or instability, if you like, that let's get the Marxian view that the working class has having a contrast with the bourgeois that will lead to the revolution. So what makes the system stable or unstable? Clearly, this is not a good way, often not a good way of looking at geography, physics, chemistry, biology, because we're looking at this. But it's perfect for any social science. Economics, legal systems, sociology, political science, legal systems, because all these disciplines are studies of equilibrium. Think in terms of game theory. Anything that, Nash, equilibrium. So they look at society, or anything that has tensions in society is the best example we have, obviously. And they say, like, oh, how can we find a way so that if I pull this way, no, this doesn't work. So law is a classic case in which you want to have enough innovation, but not too much that it becomes sort of harmful for the environment. Well, but at the same time, it has to be good for the society. But if you want to increase the taxation, at what level of equilibrium is a good system of taxation so that you get enough money without people running away or having a right, but I say not too little, not too much. So social sciences at large are perfect for conditions of stability. And that's the Hegelian view of the world. Now, not accidentally, whenever you go Kantian in social sciences, that's a little bit comes short. Anyone who go, the real cause of the Second World War is the increase of price on pigs in Slovakia. I heard that. The guy was shot. That's why the First World War. Like, no, really, it's more complex. And you start thinking, no, the way equilibria, movements. You go immediately Hegelian. Condition of stability, and therefore instability. Stability had to be reestablished. There was a vacuum. So Kant and the kind of causality doesn't really quite work. At the same time, try to go Hegelian when it comes to physics. Oh, there's a dialectic between matter. I thought the rubbish you see is like, don't go Marx-Leninist in physics. It's just ridiculous. So again, not a good idea. What is missing here, and that's what we do in this course, is the third component. Because of the three things that you can do, these are 1 and 2. So you got it. What is missing here are the conditions of doability of physics. So it's not like you got the particular, say, system that you are modeling, and your model tries to understand the causal genesis of the system. So if you like, this is the system at this point, and you're working on what brought it about. Kant. That's really oversimplifying. Yeah? So then you look at the system and you're like, okay, how does it count that you can actually stay more or less, say it's full of water, but no, I can still move the water from here to there, and it stays in that stable, unstable conditions. Both Kant and Hegel have this very modern, very Cartesian perspective that science, knowledge, our understanding of the world is about what is there. Fast forward, and some of our understanding has become increasingly in terms of what needs to be there. What can I build, literally? So it's no longer about understanding the system as given, but our system then needs to be produced, constructed, engineered. So look at, once again, at the normal sciences, and you will find that in the philosophy of science textbook, physics plays a fundamental role. Sometimes biology, sometimes chemistry, depending on the orientation. Mathematics is so important that it doesn't even get into the philosophy of science textbook. It gets its own philosophy of mathematics textbook. What you need to sort of also concentrate your attention on is that if you were to ask people outside what kind of sciences make the biggest difference in their life, and give them a list, they say, well, how about computer science? Yeah, computer science. Architecture, yes, absolutely. No, that's where I live. Engineering, absolutely. That's how we build stuff. And law, oh yes, law, yes, definitely. That determines what I can or cannot do, what am I allowed to. How about economics? Yeah. So these 5 sciences, they're all about building the object that they study. Physics is not in this textbook material. So you look at stars and you don't want to decide, am I going to build a new star? Do I like that star? Am I going to modify that star? The star is not too shiny, unless, it's a kind of a sci-fi moment. But in economics, in political science, in law or jurisprudence, in engineering, in computer science, the object that is being studied is also the object either you want to build or change. Now, if you look at the history of science, my impression, and this is to be taken with a lot of salt, because you hear this from me, so see how it goes in your own perception. But we have, since the scientific revolution onwards, we have slowly shifted towards sciences that are increasingly less representative and increasingly constructive, but not, as I said, in the sort of joke of French way, there's nothing out there, everything's good. No, in the concrete sense in which architecture, engineering, law, so build, modify, improve, change the object of the study. Now, this is not the classic view that you get from an introduction to philosophy of science textbook. So it doesn't really help there. But this is the third way of looking at a model. So a model can be a way of capturing, I try to avoid the word representation for obvious reason, a way of capturing some of the data provided by the system into a piece of information by having as a purpose the conditions that led to it, the conditions of possibility. Some other times you just want to, and it could be compatible, you want to know how the system keeps working. How can it be stable or unstable? What would be destabilize, for example, the government in Afghanistan? Because then you have a whole chain of potential policies to do that. But some other times you don't have the system. And so what kind of model of a system are we talking about? There is a blueprint. So the system is what is in the world. The model is a way of capturing, or as long as you know what we're talking about, representing the system. Blueprint is a way of providing the conditions of feasibility of that. Now, this condition for feasibility for the engineer, architect, lawmakers, computer scientists in the room are called requirements. So the logic of this mechanism when it comes to modeling something that doesn't exist is the logical requirements. For another day, because this is not the right context that we will be going too far, but this is a typical example. At some point, the iPhone didn't exist. This is the actual blueprint of the iPhone 5. It hasn't changed ever since. Just need to remember I'm on record, so we need to be careful about these jokes. And next thing you know, Apple is coming. Since Steve Jobs, we haven't made the iPhone anything more than Steve Jobs had in mind. He could have 5 or 6, whatever, 27 cameras, but that's not the big difference. Because it is not there, so what you are capturing here are the conditions of visibility of this object at a level of abstraction provided, obviously here, in terms of user interface. This blueprint doesn't tell you, for example, how much it costs. It's not economically related. It doesn't tell you the markets evaluation or market attractiveness, etc. This is the view. In this sense, can we, now that we have the terminology, we know how to work with level abstractions. We know that level abstractions provide the means through which we can model reality, either in terms of what is out there, or in terms of putting it there in the first place. So there is, for example, a base in front of me. I want to create a new base. I have a design of the base, and I implement the base. That is a blueprint of the base. There is no model of the base since the base exists. I just put it there through. Once we have all this, what kind of ontology is helpful in order to understand our contemporary society? What's the purpose? Understanding the digital revolution. So is the digital revolution better understood in terms of an object-oriented, not so much a joke, not quite close to the actual computer science idea, encapsulation and everything else for anyone here who does that kind of stuff, or is it better to look at the level of abstraction where relations have an ontological priority? Now, the priority here doesn't, it means not that something, that in your order of things that come first and after, logically speaking, something comes before, something comes later. There is no way of solving the chicken and egg. You just want to say, okay, in my design, watch me, I just put the egg first. This is another, now if those of you will ever read Hegel makes a big deal of the problem of the beginning. How do you possibly start talking about the chicken and egg? He doesn't talk about chicken and egg, but that's the trivialized way, and it's not profound. What comes first? How can I start talking about reality when I don't know whether that reality comes first, this or that? Well, the beauty of not doing metaphysics, but doing ontology, and designing your ontology, is that you can decide. You can simply decide, well, in my ontology, what comes first is the egg. Logically speaking, makes more sense to have something small that becomes a chicken. And say, okay, but in the real world, is it the chicken or the egg? Out of this room now, because you're in the wrong class. In the real world, is not something we can possibly decide. It's an empty request. It's like saying, no, what if I had a God's eye perspective? Would there be a chicken first or a 12? Anyone's game. Well, God's eye view is actually a thing in philosophy, and the criticism of the God's eye view is immense. Now, how does a ontology that looks at the world in terms of relations look like? This is something you may have already done in the past, especially in high school. I hope so. But so a long time ago, when you were, we will use geometry in order to explain the point and so a long time ago, you might have been exposed to this, and people may have told you that a point in ordinary, simple, I don't know, fifth grade kind of geometry, sort of point line, nothing sophisticated, okay, is the limit of a line. So you go here and says, oh, how can I describe a point? Well, it's what comes at the end of the line. It doesn't have an extension because it's where the line ends. That's why it doesn't have an extension. Well, these days, we have a better way of describing a point. The point, which is the limit of a line, is actually a cut of a line. I'll tell you more why this helps in a while. So imagine you have a string. Wherever you cut that string, then it's a point. Asking how big that point is means not having understood what you just did. This is static. This is dynamic. You actually cut the string. Once you understood this, which is as simple as it is, there's nothing more. No rabbit out of the hat. So how is that? All this, that is all this. So okay, a point is the cut almost. We have from, which is, well, now you have to tell me what a string is, the line. Once upon a time, if you did the right school, they told you that the line was a limit. Now, the idea was that limit was a good concept to use, but there's nothing dynamic in that. The limit of a 2D surface. Now, if you like, the borders of NS, these are lines. But since we have understood the trick of the cut as an adjunct, not the animal. And the way that I pronounce it, it would be highly misleading. It's a cut of a 2D surface, is the red line. Take a piece of paper, cut it, and there's exactly the length of the cut. Well, but if you understand, like, oh, how thick it is, it's a one-dimensional. Obviously, it has a length, but it doesn't have no thickness. Problem solved? Of course not, because now we need to understand what a 2D surface is. And the 2D surface, you got to just, was that a limit? Yes, it was a limit of a 3D object. So you would have like a cube or a nice piece of cheese, which I prefer, and cheddar, possibly, that comes in a nice block. And the face of that piece of cheddar would be your solid surface. It has two dimensions, it's long and large, but it has no depth. Cheddar is useful because, of course, when you go to the shop and they cut that cheddar, with that string, by cutting it, you get exactly a surface, a 2D surface through another cut. Why is this useful? Because finally, we can start talking about objects. Because all this, we don't need points in life, not in our own mentality. No, things that have an existence but are unextended in any possible way. Lines, well, not really anything that we ever meet has some length, at least one atom, sort of thickness, and of course, 2D surfaces. So there's no such thing. We meet 3D objects. And what are 3D objects at this point? If a point is a zero-dimensional cut of a one-dimensional line, a line is a one-dimensional cut of a two-dimensional surface, a surface is a two-dimensional cut of a 3D object. Obvious. That comes so natural. What is a 3D object? It's a cut. It's a cut in a four-dimensional continuous space and time. That's what an object is. And I find this highly satisfactory. I don't have a problem in understanding now space and time. And this black thing here with space and time around it, it's a cut, it's an undoing to the continuum of space and time. Now, that is why limit is not such a good idea. A little bit like lenses, it's a static, dead sort of thing. But cuts the dynamic of how the world is constantly keeping this chair, a chair with all the forces, the empty, quote unquote, space, but also the field that keeps this chair to such a state that I can sit on it without crashing. Well, that is that special 3D cut in the continuum of space and time. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can keep going, because space and time could be another cut in the continuum of course, this is good enough for our everyday objects. But what we have introduced now is the idea that objects are not primordial. They're not the first. It's not that the world is made of objects and see what happens. But no, the world, if whatever there is out there, is something that if we, as special as we speak right now, epistemic level of abstraction with this voice, look at this room, we will see all these cuts in 3D continuum of space and time as objects. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the kind of ontology I want to deal with. Not metaphysics. I'm not saying that that's the way the world is, but I'm saying that's how we conceptualize, abstract, etc., manipulate the world. And obviously it works pretty well, because so evolution has made us the sort of 3D cuts in space and time that deal with other 3D cuts in space and time successfully. If we didn't deal with them successfully, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Okay, so this is pretty good. This actually, I'm told, is a representation of what a 3D object may look like. And you cannot do that in a static way. It has to be dynamic. Basically, a cube that enters into itself. Not very intuitive. So things are carved out of space and time. They're carved out. It's a way in which we perceive the universe to be carved out as. We also epistemically could carve that universe in a different way. In fact, we do that when we do different kinds of sciences. We, for example, may be inclined to use a lot of set theory, which is the default mammalian way of thinking, no matter what one knows about set theory, in terms of objects, probably objects, relations, Lego-like. And think in terms of, for example, drops from a fountain. Next time you see a fountain, they're not very common here, but if you come to Rome, there are fountains everywhere. And all those drops. Now imagine that you had the ability of, or say, you're taking a movie and slow down that movie, and there's a drop of water that goes up in the sky, and at some point, from water to water. It was not a drop. Is it an object for X number of seconds? It will not be an object in a number of seconds, or maybe fraction of seconds. That is your life. We are a cut in the continuum. We stand as individuals. We come back to the continuum. What happens before and after, I leave it to your potential religious belief. But that's the way of understanding your life. I was part of the whole. I stand out as an individual. I will become part of the whole again. In a continuum of cycling. That's what it means to have these kind of space and time, ourselves included. The final good question. So, a long time ago, a super famous philosopher called Lucretius, it was destined because I went actually to a high school called Lucretius. Who knows? Jokes of life. I wrote this beautiful book that I recommend. You don't have to read in Latin, available in English, on the nature of things. Is the first century before Christ. This is a beautiful copy, sort of illustrated, in 1483, in which he explains in verses. It's an amazing, it's a classic of all times literature, the atomistic view of the universe. And of course, some of the things are really strange, but most of it is quite amazing. I mean, it's an attempt to provide a view of the universe that has no gods, that has no spirituality, that has no strange forces, and it's all about atoms which go and bump into each other and move different trajectories and so on. So, highly recommended. The question is, do we have a On the Nature of Things 2.0 today? What would be, someone, if any of you, I don't recommend it, but should you decide to, be very poetic and write, 300 pages of poems on the new nature of things, in Latin possibly, what would be like? What are things today? Let me introduce, as I said, the infamous. Told you that we were coming back to this. So tell me, is there anyone in this room who doesn't see faces? Anyone? Of course not. I mean, you're bound to see a face. Maybe not so much from this guy who's not done this with his tongue, ounce, and maybe I'm a bit of a ghost. But this guy's happy, unhappy, and this one with wrongness. So this, of course, there's nothing human faces with. This is a typical thing that happens to humans. It's called pareidolia, the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern. It doesn't have to be faces. Faces are particular. We have, apparently, there's a way in which the brain is geared that tends to have a special sort of spot for faces. But there are plenty of things. The Virgin Mary, Uncle John in a cloud. So we just cannot not see it. No? Can I not see that face? It's just beyond me. No. Now, this is my attempt. Is a bit of a trick to convince you that we are so geared to see the world as objects. Change this into, let me just go back for a moment, sorry. Change this into an attitude towards what surrounds us. And as soon as you leave this room, the world will go back like a rubber band to, of course, the objects. Look at that car, it's moving from here to there. There is an object. There is no way that there is another cut in the 3D, blah, blah, whatever the guy said. Yeah, whatever, philosophy. Like this. Of course, this is a face. Whatever the guy says, there is a face. I'm going to treat it as a face. Now, I'm going to talk to that coffee. Now, in fact, some people will be careful not to upset the coffee. Actually, my family will have strange things going on here, but that's not this tendency, I don't particularly enjoy crying all the time. I think it's too much of an empiricist for my taste. I now belong to that tradition. Descartes, Kant, more rationalist than empiricist. It was one of the greatest philosophers of the past century, from the other place, unfortunately, but it's all from Harvard. But this is, I think, a masterpiece. And if you haven't read this article, by the way, which is Structure and Nature, Journal of Philosophy, just a few pages, it's beautiful, 1992. I read it aloud for those of you who are online. The very notion of an object, at all, concrete or abstract, is a human contribution. This is a guy who knew his science, and he was a down-to-earth empiricist. We're not talking, Paris, no, Galois, fancy baba-boom. No, this is totally empirical philosophy as it gets. And yet, science ventures its tentative answers in man-made concepts, perforce couched in man-made language, that was the time, human-made, but we can ask no better. The very notion of objects, or of one and many, is indeed as parochially human as the parts of speech. To ask what reality is really like, however, apart from human categories, is self-stultifying. Yeah, you're right. I can quote someone else. I don't have to say it myself. It's like asking how long the Nile really is, apart from parochial matters of miles and meters. Remember when I told you, what's the price of the car? And you say, $50, $100, $1 million. No, don't give me those dollars. What's the real intrinsic price? Possibly in italics when you speak. Of the car. I said, I can't do that. I have to tell you in pounds, in camels, in dollars, in stuff. But I have to have a time. This is not Cartesianism, Kantism. they don't hear the voice of the car that tells you the price. Okay, so that's denial, okay? It's not that denial doesn't have a leg, but that leg has to be expressed in miles or kilometers. And what's the real intrinsic ultimate nominal length of denial is an idiotic question. It just, no, as I told you before, no level abstraction, total mess. Now, that means that now, if you have a picture like this, that's the best picture I could find of objects. And thanks to the photographer who took it, you really think that there's a hammer, there's an axe, and so on. But this is, to be a little bit fancy, ontological pareidolia. You cannot but, I cannot but perceive objects. Is there really so? Are there really faces out there? The tendency to perceive specific permanent things in a network of relations. Here is a more dramatic example. We're very happy to talk, especially philosophers, normally about horses, because we come from Greek origins, and we still, after 25 centuries, we still talk about horses. We'll never go over that. But some more contemporary philosophers also speak about tables and chairs, upgrading the terminology. But we speak about things insofar as they seem to be out there. Then someone all of a sudden asks you about democracy. And say, yeah, well, democracy is a thing. Well, not in my own world. At least this thing is a cut, the 3D space, continuum, time, etc. But democracy, where exactly do you bump into? Friendship, poverty. You start looking at abstract nouns, trust, reliability. And all of a sudden, it's like, what world are we talking about? Where is this stuff? Well, imagine someone, instead of saying that the United States is a democracy, says, because they don't have abstract nouns, in their own English, they can only use adverbs. And they say, whatever happens politically in the United States happens democratically. So democracy is actually a noun that has a transformation on an adverb, which is a way of doing things. Don't tell me it's a way of cutting, because then things start really spinning. Oh, that's how we cut these things. We cut in such a way that the outcome of the cut is democracy. But what I've been cutting is the process of acting politically, democratically. So there is a process, and a continuum process, of democratically treating and interacting and voting and having your rights defended, or no, your not, etc. You cut that to simplify to the most. You get the adverb and you transform into a noun. Now think of all the other times of friendship. Have you ever met it? Or have you met relations that were qualified by a friendly way of oh yes, of course, that's a way of. So there's process everywhere. It's just that we, the mammalians, we see faces, we see objects, we transform processes into objects. We like to think of friendship and democracy. And all of a sudden, you look for the mind. See, the mind. Or is there a way of behaving in such a way that will be mentally, It's a process. So you can't pinpoint, the mind is this, the mind is there, the mind is here, the mind is there. You must be joking. There is no way in the whole country that you will ever meet something that is a democracy. Of course, the traditional, especially in religious and political discourse, what you need is some kind of implementation, physically speaking, of a noun that was an adverb, because we were cutting and chopping continuum processes in such a way that we could, as human beings, or as mammalians with this kind of way of looking at the world, in terms of handling, a democracy, or a monarchy has just become a democracy. Something that was monarchically, was transformed. But we like the A into B. And so in the same context, as I said, religiously, politically, we like symbols. So the crown becomes the symbol of a monarchy. And finally, I have an object, which I can point to. So if I burn the flag of the United States, I'm burning the country, I'm burning the democracy. It's all about building, through level of abstractions, a concrete world of entities that we can handle. And it's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. I mean, as long as you know what you're doing. So this transformation of a world that is made of relations and continuum, and I'll tell you more in a moment, into a world of things, which then we can handle conceptually, intellectually, scientifically. As long as it's not misleading, it's a godsend, so to speak, bonus, because you have then the ability to transform all that into a Lego-like, where things completely go together. A democracy, you know, is healthy or is unhealthy. Now, the monarchy became a democracy, and so on. And the economy, has crashed. I don't know if people say, oh, poor economy is crashing. So, as long as you get the gist, then the ontology could be very powerful and could be exactly the ontology that we need, or we might want to have a different kind of ontology. But we are free from, remember what I said at the beginning, we are the only species on this planet that are free from the ultimate ontology that is given to us with these bodies. So why do we have to stick to the only ontology that we don't ever challenge? The ontology of objects. From Aristotle onwards, substance, form, straight ahead. We have always been talking about ultimately something that we don't question. In philosophy, where we question everything, we should start questioning how. So thing-oriented ontology. Now, once we do that, how can we conceptualize all this? How can we help ourselves with other images? Because it doesn't come natural. Remember when I told you, look, finally an object is it's a 3D cut in the continuum of 4 dimensions. Okay, that helps a little bit. Well, this is one way of representing objects. Objects are like roundabouts. And if you are not from that country, that comes familiar. So it's not a particularly sort of inventive way of presenting the topic. So a roundabout, which I think is also a word in the United States. I'm not joking, yeah? So a roundabout is where roads meet. It's a totally serious thing. You don't cross it without checking, and it is a thing. Okay? But no one would consider a roundabout prior to the roads that meet there. Anyone in his right mind will consider first there are the roads, and when the roads meet, there is a roundabout. First, there are processes and relations, and when this meet, there is a channel. That's me, right here. A cut in a 3D, 4D continuous space and time with all these roads that met right here, right now. The language I speak, the age I have, the color of my hair, the DNA, these are all roads. So gazillion, trillions of roads that make that thing unique. If you say, oh, it's where 2 roads meet, like what? 1964, Italian. Well, there are so many other roundabouts like that. Well, with their name, at some point, it's only you. It's only this object. Nothing is like this. So the question, are there plates or the universal plate, which is implemented by the individual plate? Or are there only many millions of individual plates? And we just pick up one and say, oh, this stands for all the others. Universalism or nominalism, it's a bit of a non-starter. It depends on the levels, you get the gist. Depends on what the question is for, etc. And above all, in terms of uniqueness, how many roads are you putting together? Now, this is called the magic roundabout. It's a particularly messy thing. You don't even there if you don't know, because it's a roundabout made of roundabouts. But that is to show you that it can get complicated in terms of roads. So things are like roundabouts where relations, and I'll tell you more in a moment, meaning also functions and processes meet. Well, for someone so precise now, relations, functions, processes, all the same? Oh, yes. So in the theory of relations, you can start from relations, and if relations are, let me simplify this, you just have to believe, but in this case, I trust you to believe me, because if you don't believe me, that's the maths you should be studying. Sometimes I warn you that this is controversial, this is not. So in theory of relations, there's a simple way of transforming relations from one place relation, for example, the channel is old, into a two-place relation. Luciano is older than Jess, and so on. So you can have many, so you can have a single quality or property, a relation to two or n objects, and as you know, when the property changes, there is a process. Luciano moves from 59 to 60. That quality now has a change, a state change. So the theory relation provides all the conceptual apparatus that we need to talk about functions, which are just a special kind of relations, unary properties, which are relations with one place, and places or processes, which is a way of transition from one product to another. If this doesn't make any sense, all you need to remember is I have the apparatus, which is the theory of relations, to discuss the whole theory about processes, functions, relations, etc. What I can do, and I'm suggesting here, is that I can use the same apparatus also to talk about objects. So transform relations into the primary point on which I focus in my ontology, this side, to have some sense of whatever metaphysics is on the other side. Through a level of abstraction that privileges relations instead of objects. So from things to interactions, this is a quote from, actually a misquote from Quine. When some point said, what does it mean to exist? Existence is to be the value of an existentially quantified variable. This is not exactly what you would expect. Now, like, oh, okay, now that's so clear. Simplifying quite a lot, to be interactive. That is the world in which we increasingly tend to operate. Something is real if you can interact with it. If you cannot interact with it, it's dead to you. Now, that sounds a lot like digital interactability, and that's exactly what I'm moving. So a ghost is a ghost because you cannot really interact with it. The moment it starts moving things around and it gives you a slap, well, I don't care. That is as real as it gets. The reason why ghosts are not real is because you cannot interact. The reason why people are dead is because you cannot interact with them as people. If I could interact with them as people, not just a corpse, but as, say, my mom, well, I wouldn't care whether that corpse is there or elsewhere, etc., etc. So something is out there if you are related with it out there in an interactable way. Now, mind the interaction doesn't tell you what it is. I could be interacting with something in the other room, just pushing blindly somewhere, having no idea whether it's a chair, a table, a corpse. So we move from interaction to relations, and the job is done. So the primacy of relations means that our Urphilosophy, which is a fancy way of talking German, at some point I didn't speak German or Greek, to provide some credibility to your philosophy. Latin a little bit. By Urphilosophy, I mean the philosophy behind the philosophy. If you discover that any philosophical or any conceptual way of understanding the world assumes as unquestionable and never even thought about questioning a world made of objects, well, it means that the philosophy behind that conceptualization, behind that philosophy, the Urphilosophy behind, is a philosophy based on objects, thinking, well, I cannot even see the fish in the water. No, I don't even know that I'm in a bowl full of water. Why this helps? Well, because we can move. Let me see if yes. I put the word network here because if you have philosophy behind philosophy, so your primordial philosophy, the very beginning of your way of thinking, the world is made of objects. The next thing is a mechanistic view of the world. Objects combine with other objects, bump into each other. They split, they pile up, they like or they don't like. Essentially, imagine anything that is made of things which then builds into more complex things. A mechanism like this object, if we understand this object as a mechanism, has the following straightforward, peculiar feature. It's made of things that can stand by themselves. Take the classic car. the wheels can be independent. The engine, the chassis, whatever, all the pieces come together and they make a more complex object. But each of them exists in and of itself. Now, in a network, that is exactly the other way around. There is no node without relations. It's not that you have nodes, remember roundabouts, and then you say, oh, let me connect this node to that node. That doesn't work that way. A node in a network, decent way of conceptualizing, is what happens once you know the relations. Now, of course, in our design way, we can do whatever we want, but roundabout helps. No one in his right mind should plan the roundabouts and then build the roads. Although I've seen places like that, especially in Italy. So objects as nodes, and your whole philosophy could be at least flexible enough. I hope you will opt for it, but at least you have the option now to think as in terms of mechanisms, very Cartesian, very modern, very sort of all the way to Kant, or in terms of networks. Networks have now, the nodes come after the relations. In mechanisms, first come the bits and then how you put them together. So the totality of the world is the totality of relations. Sounds like a big Wittgenstein? Yeah, pretty much. So we say the totality of the world is the totality of facts. We're very close. If you take the totality of all the natural relations, well, there is the universe in which we live. Some of them transform into specific kind of ways of putting them together, clustering those nodes. And if you cluster enough, and there's a bit of a weak connection with the others, then you start treating that thing as a thing. So you don't really see, for example, a body like mine, emitting constantly, losing cells 24/7 in the environment, losing hair 24/7, exuding heat 24/7. That's not what you see. You see a body, and you re-identify that body as identical through time. Of course, that is a fiction, because at some point you start wondering, am I really the same person as I was when I was 5 years old? And those dilemmas unsolvable. You know why? Why? I was sad. So, we're almost there. The digital does not describe, but prescribe the world. It puts things into the world. It helps us enormously. In fact, all science today is digital, one way or another. I just need to speak to Kia, my wife, neuroscience, etc. No computers, no neuroscience, end of the story. They run on computation, one way or another. And so does any other science that we know of. But that's not what I'm stressing here. What I'm stressing here is that the digital, as we know in terms of digital evolution, is building new pieces of the world. Now, there's a famous metaphor a long time ago by Galileo that says, the way we understand the world is in the following way. We read the world as if we were a book of nature. It's written in mathematical sequence. What I'm suggesting here is that the digital is adding independence. There is more there that the digital is providing in terms of things that, remember, we first have a blueprint for and we implement. So, inscribing the world is what most of the digital does. It doesn't simply tell us what things are, but it also tells us what new things we find around us. It builds our environment. It builds the agents with which we interact. It builds the features and processes and interactions which we have on a daily basis. So clearly, this is not just a matter of saying, oh, in which world am I living here? But more like, Renee, come on, can I make it quick? What have you forgotten?
Just keep talking. Why would you stop? That's so embarrassing. Okay, bye everyone. Bye today.
So it's a matter of adding to the world. So insofar as it is one of the sciences, remember, the poietic sciences, the sciences like economics, political science, architecture, engineering, computer science, they study and build what they study. Clearly, it's much more than just telling us the way it is. So the teacher designs reality, inscription, and conceptualized reality, because he helps us through his science, the science, to get this different perspective. Now, you may or may not find it convincing, but I hope it at least opens up an alternative way of looking at your own understanding and knowledge, human knowledge in general, and so society in which we live. So, almost there, that was the time that. And this is what I said, we end the lecture, another 5 minutes and we're almost done. Moving from representation to construction. Now, I wanted to be very careful on the constructive side, because a lot has been said in terms of constructivism, meaning social construction of reality. This is not what I mean. I mean the engineering, the architectural, the computer scientist view of designing to build something. And what you build is as concrete as those roundabouts, through which we need to go very carefully. It's not that, oh, it's just a roundabout. No, you can die there. No. So, same idea. It's just that for a long, long history of our experience as human beings, we have been conceiving our knowledge as a representation, in this basis, representation, where in fact we're moving more and more towards a poietic approach, which, as I said, is a halfway between trying to understand the voice of being and everything goes, everything's constructed, there are no hard facts, it's all discourse, physics discourse, etc. So we try to strike a middle ground, making sure that there's enough construction to keep us room for disagreements without killing each other. Okay, different construction. I can see that now. You can see that there is the same building, and someone says it's not the same building. They have different purposes, etc. While not denying that there is something out there. No, there is something. It's sending you the signal. There are some more open questions. We have plenty, and I close here. Why this is important? Because essentially, if you start building on these grounds, and to oversimplify to the most, last week, level abstraction, today, network, relational ontology, mimesis, poiesis. Once you have that sort of outlook, then you understand why the digital revolution is so crucial today, why we have such a huge conceptual deficit. We're coming from modernity that is looking at the world in terms of zero-level abstractions, absolute truth, and objects. Wow. I mean, that is so wrong in terms of the kind of peg is not going to go in their hole, no matter how much you want to push it. And therefore, we have, in all this, a projectual deficit. I need to be a little bit careful on this because I haven't thought about it carefully enough. I mean, can always be more careful, but in this particular case, I'm less careful than usual. But I have the impression that the great philosophy or philosophers of the 20th century, they didn't open up a new philosophy. They closed the old one. Now, it took me literally coming to here to realize that. Maybe you have to leave your environment or something. But all of a sudden, it becomes quite obvious that the Wittgenstein, the Heidegger, the Carnap, the Cassirer, the Benjamin in these days, the Russell, Frege, and Husserl of the world were still reacting, engaging, fighting, rejecting, embracing modernity. They were there. And so you can either see them as the end of a long process that starts with Descartes, more or less the scientific revolution, post-Renaissance. And so those, shall we say, 4, 5 centuries, depending on how you count them, and see this as the epilogue of an amazing story, which therefore leaves us with rather quite a task to establish a new beginning. Or, as I was trained, literally, as a student, as a PhD, as a postdoc, it's the beginning of a new dawn, or a new era. You have to be Wittgenstein and Heideggerian, you have to follow Husserl or Frege. You're either with the analytic or the continental. You either believe in history and literature, or you believe in physics again. But whatever you want to do, or maybe mix the two, but that is the founding fathers, and the old fathers, by the way, of contemporary philosophy. And honestly, This is a moment of confession. So, if you like, outside the academic context, if you went in a bar and I could speak freely, I would say, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't see how we can cope with this amazing extraordinary revolution in front of us, which is the beginning of a new age for humanity, which will provide our society something increasingly digital. It's a transformation that is at the DNA of what we mean by reality, what we mean by exceptionalism in human nature, what we mean by interacting with this world, and that sort of foundational transformation, which is as deep and even more profound than the industrial and the agriculture. And we have the same kind of debates and discussion and from modernity that the Wittgenstein, say, and the Heidegger were still struggling with. I mean, they were still complaining about Descartes, okay? So you start thinking, I just not quite sure. Now, I wait another few years and maybe I come with a better alternative. But so far, I just have this projectual deficit point, which is that if you look at all of them, they have the following two features in common, which, trust me, now I'm going to keep them. Oh, wow, you look like the guy from yet, but I didn't realize them before. And they're so in front of your eyes. One, they never finish their projects. None of them. None of them. That is suspicious. Wittgenstein, of course, we have all stuff post-mortem. He never wrote a philosophical investigation, he never finished anything. In fact, he rejected his work and then just never. Also, the crisis, unfinished. Main work by also, published possibly. Heidegger, Being and Time, the second part, never appeared. Principia Mathematica, fourth volume on geometry, never published. Russell didn't finish it. Heidegger didn't finish it. Husserl didn't finish it. Wittgenstein didn't finish it. There is something going on here. So, overambitious projects, or the inability to jump into the 21st century. A sense of anchor to the past, such that there is so much to do, and I still don't see where we can go next. And it dawned on me, say, Yale open eyes are moments like, wow, this could be something. And then it dawned on me, again, a confession with a beer or a gin and tonic, probably, given what I'm going to say. Consider that I already had 3 gin and tonics, and I would confess that if you look at these people, they don't have a project for the future. A project. They're not projectable. They don't tell you, this is all the problems, and this is what we're going to do next. And this is the proposal. And it could be ethical, political, social, practical. This is the kind of society you want to build. This is the kind of being you want to be. This is the sort of interactions you want to have. No, not really. I mean, they're all stuck with something that is halfway between epistemology, transforming into a philosophy of language or logic, and a philosophy of language that is transforming into a metaphysics. But they don't care, they don't really take into account all the world of practical, in the Kantian sense, reason that is crucial. They don't speak much. Of course, no, there's plenty of volumes and tens of volumes of stuff there. So even Wittgenstein already touches upon ethics, but it's a nice to have. It's the cherry on top of the cake. They don't take that as my core business is ethical, social, political. And so you realize, together with these two things, they never finish their projects, bad students, so to speak, and they never care about the human project. What human project should we be implementing in the 21st century? If those are the greatest philosophers we ever had last century, and they should have told us something. Silence. And so you start realizing, so the way I've been trained and educated was in terms of what's the core philosophy? Epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy of language, philosophy of logic. That is the real thing. Anything else, aesthetics, political philosophy, philosophy of law, even ethics, it's an extra. It's something that, but it's not really the core. A real top, half philosopher is someone who does logic, philosophy, language, philosophy, the real stuff. And anything else. Well, you know what? It's the other way around. It's completely the other way around. So if, like me, you grew up thinking that, for example, John Locke was a great epistemologist, they wash your brain. Because the only reason to read John Locke today is as the father of American constitutionalism. It's because of what he wrote about tolerance. His epistemology stinks like nothing else. It's total negligible. It's a piece of archaeology. No one would take that seriously. But his theory of tolerance, his liberalism as ground for American liberalism and constitutionalism, and then for opening up, that is Shakespeare. That is a classic. We will be reading that in 1,000 years. So you start wondering, okay, so maybe, just maybe, after 3 gin and tonics, that was not the beginning of the 21st century. It was the end of modernity. They didn't finish their projects because they didn't have a project for the future, and rightly so, they could. I mean, fantastic job. I wish we could be that smart, but no, they were at the end of the process, and they actually enable us to put things upside down. So the history of philosophy became the history of metaphysics to begin with, Greek and medieval, and then the history of epistemology, Descartes onwards, and then later on the history of philosophy of language. Those are the real things. And I had one of my teachers, Michael Campbell, actually taught me exactly that. The history of philosophy is divided into 3 stages. Metaphysics first, we thought about reality, and then we thought about knowledge about reality, and then we thought about the language that helps us to develop the knowledge about reality. 1, 2, 3, and that's the way you need to think about history of philosophy in general. So you continue on that trajectory. Okay, so now after this comparison, so we need a philosophy of information, clearly. What else? As a conceptual design of one time for our time. So this is the attempt. And I'm happy to fail, but at least with the impression of moving in the right direction, rather than succeeding in perpetuating something that I think is there. And that's why we're not doing this in the philosophy department. So there's something a little bit sort of revolution. Philosophy as conceptual design, not as a way of only formulating problems, but as looking at the history of philosophy as a way of re-evaluating what the actual questions that are crucial should be engaged with openly, because we can not disagree, at a level, of course, of abstraction, which is the ultimate level. You know that you are at the ultimate level because you have no other discipline to which you can dump this truth. Now, mathematics, at some point, this is philosophy of mathematics. Physics will say, that's philosophy of physics. At some point, any discipline will say, you know what, this is philosophy. Once you decide to do philosophy, no one can say, oh, this is us. It stays here. There is no rubbish outside. Any rubbish we produce, it stays with us. We cannot dump. There are no sort of externalities. And the idea that we formulate the right order questions at the right level of abstraction, and we offer the right open answers. Open because you can change the level of abstraction. You can decide that some purposes have a priority today that didn't have yesterday. Simple example is that today, at some point, we decided one priority in ethics was to discuss concepts that were not in anywhere to be found in the whole textbook when I was an undergrad or graduate student. Privacy, transparency, trust, explainability, not to be found. So clearly we changed level of abstraction, and it's enriching. It's not like, oh, then every time we change, and no, it's like going to a variety of restaurants. The whole way of cooking, you don't put salt in a coffee, no matter where you should be, and if they do, no, change restaurant because you made a mistake. But you can do a lot of other things. So there are constraints. The constraints are provided by the abstraction, the purpose inside, and you can compare. You can say, look, this is better than the other one. When it comes to liberalism, I'm with John Locke. Maybe with Rawls. I don't think that this is as good as. That is a good restaurant. This is rubbish. This is not what cost here is unsustainable. Finally, not bias. So final thing, what kind of knowledge are we need to develop here? The sort of knowledge we require is that in which there happens to be an union of making and knowing how to use the thing made. Now, in our case, the thing that we are making are increasingly information things, nodes. So that's what we need to develop, and that's what we're going to do in the next presentation. Thank you. There's still more pizza there. Okay. Thank you very much. Until 7 o'clock when we close business. But anyone has to go, please, grab a piece of pizza now as you're leaving. But those of you, I'll give you 2 minutes to go, and then we stay for some Q&A.
Yeah, so because I had to run a meeting. Do you have office? I have to run to, I think it was CV to meet to talk about questions.
Oh, now.
Now?
Yeah.
To rehearse.
It's all.